Well, hello everybody, welcome to block 7 of Behind the Block Season 2, and in today's video we are making the Ohio Star. Now this is a fun block and is our first venture in the series into quarter square triangles. Now, if it's not obvious, a quarter square triangle is this, and basically it is a square cut into 4 triangles, and you get this lovely effect here. Now there are traditional ways to make this one at a time, or there are other ways to make these 2 at a time, which is what we're going to be doing today. Now this starts with 2 at a time half square triangles, so very familiar territory that we have made now throughout this series. Where this takes a twist is what happens next. And when you're doing this, you want to pay close attention to how you're placing these and make sure that you place them right, because if you don't, you won't get something that looks like what I just showed you. So it's not complicated and it's definitely not difficult. You just got to make sure that when it comes to placing those half square triangles, you are doing them in the right place. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So grab your pieces for block number 7 and let's get sewing. So here we are then with our pieces to get started on today's block. Now we are making quarter square triangles for the first time, which is very exciting, but not as complicated or scary as you might worry it is. So we've got all our pieces here. We're setting aside the smaller squares just now. We don't need those. We have the 4 larger squares, and what we've got is 2 in the green, 1 blue, and 1 background. Now, this bit is important because this will make sure that things turn out right. So you're going to take the 2 green squares, or the 2 squares of the same color, depending on whatever you're using, and you're going to start by making half square triangles as usual with the 2 at a time method. So we've drawn lines from corner to corner and we're placing right sides together. Now make sure that you do 1 with the background and 1 with your other color. This is important and this will make sense when we start to make the quarter squares. And as I said, you're going to make your usual 2 at a time half square triangles by sewing a 1/4 inch on either side of those lines and then cutting along the line and then pressing these open and then stop there. Don't trim these, just make them and press them open and then we'll come back. So I'm going to do that off camera because you've seen me do it quite a few times now. If you need a full refresher, I'll leave a link in the description to a video that will take you through step by step on how to make these half square triangles. So I'm going to go make these and then I'll be back. Okay, so I have made my 4 half square triangles, 2 with green and blue and 2 with green and background. And I have pressed these all so the seam is going towards the green fabric. And that's important because that's going to make the next step easy. I haven't trimmed these, you can see the dog ears are still on them. I've done nothing to them other than press them. So we're going to do the same thing twice. So this is 1 set and this is the 2nd set. So we'll just repeat the steps for what you're about to see. You want to place these together, right sides together, and you need to be very careful about the orientation. We do not want the same colors to touch. So we want the green to be with the background, and on this side we want the green to touch the blue. And you want to place those right sides together and nest those seams. If you just run your finger along the seam, you'll feel if it's locked together. And then you want to pin these. Do the same here, right sides together, make sure the seams are locked in place, nice and snug, and then pin them. And what we're then going to do is, like when we're making half square triangles 2 at a time, we're now going to draw a line from corner to corner here, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch either side of this line. And then we're going to cut on the line to make our quarter square triangles. And this is where the magic happens. So I'm going to draw my lines and I'm going to sew these and I'll come back and show you. Also, I just had the thought as well, you can actually draw the lines on these first and then place them right sides together. If you find that easier, then by all means do that. Or if you want to place them right sides together and then draw your lines so you get everything in the right orientation, then that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, so here we have our 2 half square triangles sewn together, and you can see my sewing a 1/4 inch on either side of that line. And as usual, when I'm making half square triangles, I like to give these a little press just to relieve any tension before I cut these. Now you can use scissors to cut along the line, or you can use a rotary cutter to cut these apart. But just as the same way as we make half square triangles 2 at a time, you're just going to cut these apart along the line, and then you're going to marvel at what appears. So I'm going to give you a sneaky peek before I press these, but just, are you ready for it? Ta-da! Quarter square triangles, look at that! Wasn't that easy? So from 2 at a time half square triangles, we can make 2 at a time quarter square triangles. And it's worth saying that this is one way of doing quarter square triangles where you have almost like the point like this. And then there are other ways to get different colors and different distributions of colors to blocks. So that's an exciting future thought for a video about different ways to make these. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to press these towards the blue and the green, and then we're going to come back and we're going to trim these up to size. Now these are pressed. You can see the seam going towards the green and the blue. And we are going to now trim these up to 4.5 inches square. So grab a square ruler. So I have a 4.5 inch square ruler, which you don't need. You can do this with any size ruler, but it does need to be bigger than the size that you're cutting. Otherwise it's very fiddly and you don't want to give yourself any of that headache to deal with. I have a masking tape line on my ruler, and it just helps with getting things straight and accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the masking tape ledge against the seam along the middle of the block. If you don't have a masking tape ledge, this ruler and many other rulers will have a 45-degree line that runs along the middle of the ruler, so you would just line it up along the seam. And remember, just the same as when we make half square triangles, the first cut is not about getting the size. The first cut is about getting a straight edge for a point of reference. So you can see there's plenty of space around this for trimming. So I'm just going to trim this off. Okay, that's giving me a nice straight edge. And then I'm going to spin this round. And because this is a 4.5 inch square ruler, I don't have to do anything. I just press down and then finish trimming the block. And there we have our beautifully trimmed quarter square triangle. And so you're just going to repeat that for all the blocks until they're all sized correctly. And here we have our 4 trimmed quarter square triangles. And these are such a fun little block. I mean, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? But that's not even what we're making today. So grab the rest of your pieces and we're going to lay this block out. This is our center square. And we're going to take these and we're going to place them around it, making sure that the blue goes towards the center square. Yay, look. Can you see the star? And then take your background corner squares and just pop them in. How fun is that? And there we have the Ohio Star block. So we're going to sew these together. We're going to place these right sides together. Now you're going to find that you got a little bit of bulk where you're going over seams. So you want to take your time, go slow. So start with this row, and I'm going to chain piece off camera. I'm going to sew these all together. Then I'm going to open them up, and then I'm going to add these pieces. Then I'm going to take them to the iron, press, 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 and then I'm going to join the rows together. So I'll be back. Here are our rows sewn together, but not pressed yet. And it's worthwhile just doing this to make sure you've got everything in the right place. You can see that it's all good. Everything's looking nice. So we're going to press these now. So you can see this naturally wants to go into the center because of the bulk of these seams. So we're going to press towards the red fabric in the middle, and then on the top and bottom row, we're going to press the outside of the block because you can see how it naturally sits that way. And so rather than fighting to get the block to do this, it makes it much easier to get the block to lie flat if you just go with the way that the blocks want to lie. So I'm going to press these and then I'm going to join them together. So just a quick check, you can see these go out, these go in, and these go out, and so these will all nest. So place these right sides together, nest your seams, be sure to pin, because we do not want anything moving about. That we've taken all the time and effort to get it all nice and flat and lined up. So pin these, sew them together, and then press. So as you can see, this is sewn together but not pressed, and the rows naturally want to go away from the center, so I'm going to press them away from the center. It's much easier to go with how the block wants to lie than forcing it to go the other way and then having to deal with bulk. So you'll find that there's quite a lot of bulk in these corners. So just take your time, give them a good press, and then I'll be back in a second. And so here is the finished block. And isn't that just beautiful? I really love how this has turned out, and I love giving this a darker square in the center just to really give it a focal point. Now it took quite a lot of time to press this. I really wanted to make sure that these were nice and flat because there is a lot of bulk here. So I took my time, used a bit of seam, gave it a good pressing. And this is how it turns out. So I'm very happy with how this turned out, and I hope you enjoy making the Ohio Star. So that was it. That was the Ohio Star, and it was a piece of cake. Nothing that we haven't done already. It's all skills that we've already used in the previous blocks. We're just now learning to take these skills and adapt and twist them to make new things out of them or with them. So as I mentioned before and during the filming, you just want to make sure when it comes to placing those half square triangles right sides together that you have the right colors lined up. You do not want the same color to touch because it will not turn out the way that we need for this block. But I like making these. They're a lot of fun and they're a lot easier than you think. Plus as well, the efficiency of making 2 at a time makes making lots of these blocks nice and easy. And talking of making lots of these blocks, why don't we have a quick look at some quilts that you can make using the Ohio Star Quilt Block. So here we have our first example quilt, which is just the basics. I've just taken the Ohio Star and I have placed it in rows, and then I have added some borders around it using the background, the green, and then finished with the blue binding. And you can see that it's very simple, but it creates a nice looking quilt with some lovely secondary patterns in the white space around the background. Now, 2 things about this. First is I don't like the green. I think there's too much green in this, so I think I would probably want to switch that green border out and perhaps make a red border to frame this a bit better, or perhaps do a blue border with red binding. Second thing is this could be a little too busy for some people, the way that these stars are touching each other and are quite close together. So this one is down to your personal taste. Some people will like this and they would want to make this, and other people would prefer that there's some white space around these stars. For me, I don't really mind. I think I probably would prefer some white space around the stars, but I do quite like the secondary patterns that it creates having the stars right beside each other. So I'm kind of on the fence with this one here, and perhaps playing with the colors that are in the Ohio Star points might make this sit a little better for me, but I do like it. Now for the second example, I've done exactly that. I have placed white space around the stars. So I've added sashing around them with some cornerstones. And this creates a much more kind of uniform look, and I think it gives the stars some room to breathe. Now I did go for the blue cornerstones here. I did try it with the red because I thought it would be good to match the center of the star. However, it didn't actually look that good. Maybe it's because it's the shade of red perhaps, but I didn't actually like it. So I preferred the blue. I didn't do the green because again there would be too much green in this. But what I feel now this time is that the green border works nicely because there is the blue cornerstone that breaks up the sea of green from all the star points. Now, it's not to say that I don't like the colours that I picked and how I designed the block. I think that's absolutely fine. I think just when things come together into the bigger quilt, sometimes it can be a little too overpowering, and that's why it's great to use a tool like PREQUILT to design things, because you can have a play and you can see things before you've committed to cutting any fabric. So I really like this, and I like the cornerstones. I think it creates a nice little bit of white space around the block, helps to break things up and just introduces a little bit more for the eyes to feast upon. So this is nice, and I would definitely make this. Now let's look at example 3. And I like to use on point layout for this one to show you some of the things you can do. Now you could emulate the very first example and just have this full of stars, but again, to me it looks a little bit busy and the sea of green from all the points is a bit much. So then I thought, what if you started playing with this and adding some of these kind of square in a square? So I think it's the economy block, or very similar. It's basically a coloured square with background round it, and putting them all on point, and then just playing with the arrangement. So you can see how we kind of have the points. So these would be like greater than or less than signs in formulas and maths. So it creates these kind of points that point towards the center star, and then I added the blue economy block or square and square, whatever you want to call it, that then break up the stars. And then we've got stars in the corner. So I actually really like this. And this was just playing to see what was possible. And I think I would make 2 tweaks to this. I think I would add dark binding to really frame this. So I wouldn't add a border, but just keep it as it is. I'd add a really dark binding, so probably the red, to frame this. And then that center star, I could be tempted to try and make that star a little bit bigger so it's more of a focal point, because it feels like everything is pointing into the center, so it feels like it needs just a little bit more wow to really make it pop in there. So I would probably want to try and play with that and see if I can make it bigger or do something to the star to really make it stand out. But this is lovely, and I I love playing with these things because you can just, these things just come out your head and you don't know what's in there. And then you end up with something like this, and then it goes on the list of things that you want to make that's getting longer and longer. But anyway, I really like this, and I think that something as simple as putting a block on point like this can really just change how a quilt looks. So those are 3 examples. I hope you like them, and consider giving one of them a try and let me know. So there we have it. How to make the Ohio Star Quilt Block, and then some example quilts that you can make using these. I do also just want to mention as well, one more thing that came to mind after the example quilts is when you're sewing these, like all the half square triangle blocks, the more half square triangles that are in the block, the more bulk you will have when you sew things together. So do take your time, do slow down over the bulky seams, use lots of pins to make sure things don't shift, and just take it slow. And if things don't quite line up or they don't quite come out right, you can always unpick and do it again. But the key is to take it slow and not zoom through, because things will shift and get stuck, and the sewing machine will have a habit of chewing things up as it tries to deal with that bulk. So anyway, that's it for this month. That was the Ohio Star. Next month's block, block number 8, is the hourglass block. And we're going to be taking these skills we've just learned for quarter square triangles, and we're going to be applying them in a different way to get a different kind of colour turnout. So you'll have to wait and see next month how to make that. But in the meantime, if you did enjoy this video and you found it helpful, please do consider giving it a little thumbs up and clicking that subscribe button so that you can get notified when block number 8 in the series comes out. If you're sewing along, tag me on Instagram at the ColourBlind Quilter, or use the hashtag behind the blocks too, so I can see what you've been making, because people are making some beautiful versions of these blocks and it's lovely to see your work. So tag me so I can see what's going on, and have a fun month sewing, and we will see you next month for block number 8.